Hello, how you doing? Okay, this is a bit heavy of a video, but it's important. It's like I have something to offer to the subject out there right now of the riots, the BLM, the really even just politics and like everything that's going on right now. So, like especially racism, really. Okay, so what I've seen other people do at these moments is start out by talking kind of about like their credentials, you know. So I'm a Rastafarian. I've spent pretty much all of my, not all, but almost all of my adulthood. I'm 49. So for many years now, I've been studying Rastafarianism. Rasta, or what everybody else calls it, Rastafarianism, is the religion of Bob Marley. Yes, I had dreadlocks a lot of times for a long time and stuff. But anyway, so a lot of people have been like, you know, you can't be Rasta, you're not from Jamaica, or you can't be Rasta, you're not black, you know. And it's like it's one of the struggles of being a white person and a Rastafarian. And even if you go like inside the movement itself, and you know, as you're studying it, it is for black people. And it's like, you know, you know, why is life, you know, put me here and yet, you know, it doesn't seem like there's a place I belong, you know. That's what it seems like, but that's not what it's like. So the most fantastic thing about Rasta is that the Rasta comes from Ras, which means Duke, Tafari, Ras Tafari, Rastafari. So Ras Tafari, Duke Tafari, was an emperor of Ethiopia. And if anyone that's ever walked the earth deserves a reward for not being racist, for being an expert at not being a racist, if any one person deserves a reward for that, it's Haile Selassie. And if he were here, he would say, well, I pray to Jesus. It's all because of Jesus. Haile Selassie is the winner of the Who's the Most Not Racist contest. So if you know, so anyone can be Rasta, because all you have to do is just say, oh yeah, I love Haile Selassie and I study the teachings of Haile Selassie. You know, and it's like, oh, okay, you win the argument. You know, Haile Selassie definitely loves everybody, and Haile Selassie would love you and loves me. So like I know, like Haile Selassie is not exactly a subject that's really well known, you know. So I know quite a bit more about the mind of Haile Selassie. You know, I pray to Haile Selassie, I pray to Jesus, I pray to Mother Mary. You know, sometimes I just kind of pray to the universe. You know, but that's another subject, and I've done videos on that. Definitely, the religion that I founded, Yan Sui. You can see it says back there, Yan Sui. You know, but you can study that and see what I actually believe. This isn't about what I believe. But that's what I've done, is I've ended up just kind of like forming my own form of Rasta. You know, it's not a white people Rasta. It's really just my version of Rasta for me. Sometimes kind of as a white person, but really just as someone that knows Haile Selassie is what it's all about. So what I want to do here is I want to compare. You know, everybody talks about the subject of fighting for black people's freedoms like it's this thing that some people know how to do, but really it's a very divided subject. Okay, Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to analyze the lives of 4 famous African freedom fighters: Marcus Garvey, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and Haile Selassie. Okay, and I'm gonna kind of go over the black history on these people and kind of compare how their messages are different and things like that. Okay, so we can know So this is really about the history of people that have been fighting for black people's rights, okay? And like, because like right now, everybody's just kind of, with the BLM, everybody's just kind of jumping into it, okay? Another credential, I'm 49 years old, okay? These people in the BLM and that, they're my children, okay? My generation were the parents of the people, of those people. Those are our kids, okay? And my parents were the hippies of the 60s, okay? This is very important. In the 60s, there was free love and all that, so all of a sudden there was these babies, and the marriages didn't last. There was divorces, and women were working for the first time, and the man and the woman was working. You know, basically my generation, us, the kids of the hippies, we were at home alone, sometimes with just one parent who was always at work. You know, so we had to learn, we had to cook in microwaves, and we had to kind of, then, you know, we had the house to ourselves and things like that. Not all the time, you know. Not in my case. My mom was a stay-at-home parent. I was a stay-at-home parent for my kid, you know. So not even with the next generation is that always true. But this is really relevant here, okay? So I'm a Gen X kid, and my son is a millennial. These are millennials. The BLM protesters and all that. These are a bunch of millennials, okay? They're my kids. There's a big difference. Like my generation, the parents, they were all about distant, you know, like the idea of a good parent was just someone that provided, you know, that paid for everything, gave them clothes, gave them shelter, and you know, didn't hug them or support them. I mean, some did, if you're lucky. Mine didn't. I never was hugged. I was never supported. No one ever said, "You can do it. I believe in you," or anything like that. Never got hugged once. Certainly never got kissed. Never happened. You know, I saw some kids did. There's, you know, you can never overgeneralize with anything in life. But my son's generation, the millennials, the way we reacted, when you have kids, a part of you says, "I'm going to do this better than my parents did it," you know? So my generation was like, "Oh, we're going to hug these kids. We're going to kiss them." Like my generation was so loving and supporting. We're hugging them and kissing them and saying, "Well, I believe in you," sticking up for them. They have no right to do that. They're bullies. And, you know, my parents' generation, if a bully beats you up, they're on the side of the argument of the bully. They're like, "Oh, well, you better toughen up then." But my generation of parents, we were like, "Oh no, you can't. They're bullying my son, or they're bullying my daughter," you know. So everybody complains that the millennials have this self of entitlement and that they're lazy and things like that. So this new generation of protesters are millennials, you know. They struggle with entitlement issues. They struggle with, you know. So like I saw this interview, this guy was trying to make some BLM people look bad, and he was just simply saying, "So what do you want from white people?" You know. And then, like, if you look at the BLM, their demands for white people and their demands, you know, when asked, "What do you want to do?" suddenly you realize that they're not very well organized or thought out. They have ridiculous, they want ridiculous things, you know. And so it's just a bunch of emotion and you know. So this is relevant. You see what I mean? Okay, so that's what I want to do. I'm kind of doing this as like, you guys, you know, you guys are my kids, you know, not literally, but I'm kind of like speaking from my generation's perspective to your generation, as someone from my generation that actually studied it and knows Black history, because like not very many of us did. Okay, so I'm kind of rare, but I'm a Black history person, and I'm from Gen X, and I raised a millennial. Okay, my son's awesome. You know, these are awesome people. Like, it's not, you know, it's not their fault. Like, my generation and my parents' generation needs to back off from these people, okay? Nobody's perfect. They're doing the best they can, okay? So I'm on your side, millennials. I'm on your side right now, BLM. I want you to listen to me right now. That's what this is about. This is for you, okay? Okay, so Marcus Garvey, Okay, so this subject, a good place to start is Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was the 1920s. Okay, in the 1920s, this is when these African freedom fighters, which I'll call them, you know, people say black freedom fighters. Remember, I'm a Rastafarian. We kind of have our own way of wording things. In Rasta, we call this African freedom fighting. So that's what I'm going to call this subject. And the African freedom fighters, the story starts with Marcus Garvey in the 1920s, okay? So, and I want you guys to look at, I'll give you book references, and if you really want to, like, you should listen to everything I say and take the book references very seriously, okay? Marcus Garvey is known as a forgotten hero. So listen, you know, if you want to know about, look up Marcus Garvey. You pretty much have to listen to Rastafarians, okay? We're the ones that care about that subject. There is things that aren't right, blah, blah, blah. You'll figure it out. But anyway. Okay, so Marcus Garvey, like I'm going to look at it from book reference. There's two major books. There's the book that his wife made, Amy Jacques Garvey, called Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. They're both thick. It's a big old book, but the other one's Life and Lessons. It's even bigger. It's the size of a telephone book. It's a good sized book, and it's called The Life and Lessons of Marcus Garvey, written by Marcus Garvey. If you really want to absorb the message of Marcus Garvey, you would want to get both books. They kind of like have different areas. Like the one by his wife is kind of it's good about, like, if you already know the general history of Marcus Garvey, what he did, what happened. That book's really good because it'll get you into the mind of Marcus Garvey during those moments, classic things he said, and it also is a good collection of just speeches in general of the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey, like it says. It defends real heavily the accusations. He did some time in prison. If you want to know, like, well, what really happened from Marcus Garvey's perspective about that whole thing, that book goes into extreme detail about that. But of the two books, the one I recommend is Life and Lessons by Marcus Garvey. It's a big book, but this book is the manual to be it's the how to be an African freedom fighter, okay? Marcus Garvey started the largest organization, worldwide organization of black people that there's ever been, called the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Of course, back then black people were called Negroes. They changed it to black people like in like late 70s, early 80s. So even for way after that, mostly you would hear Negro, but black people just, you know, the closer you get to 1980, the more you hear black people called black people. So the Universal Negro Improvement Association, and he was the general and leader of that. He was a bit militant. He was a big fan of Napoleon. He would even dress like Napoleon. He's kind of like the Black Napoleon. And so if you listen to his speeches, and I'll make a playlist, and I'll give you a classic moment of what his speeches were like. His speeches laid down the problem. So Marcus Garvey was good about laying, like as far as from the perspective of his speeches, was really good about laying down the problem. You know, black people, you know, very specific. Black people have this problem, and this problem, and this problem, and are oppressed because of this, and this is happening, and this is happening, and this is happening. Very specific about exactly what this oppression is, and exactly what is happening, and why. And the more you go into his readings, you'll go more into religion and things like this about why they're happening and what the situation is. Okay, but if you read the book Life and Lessons of Marcus Garvey, or Life and Lessons by Marcus Garvey, it's more like a manual of subjects, you know, and it's like a manual of how to be what he calls the self-made man. Okay, the self-made man was the name of his program. And if you were a Garveyite, is what they called people that followed Marcus Garvey, then you were trying to be a self-made man, and he told you how to do that. he said things like have a big liquor cabinet, so when people come over, you can serve them alcohol, but don't drink any yourself, because if you get drunk, you'll just say embarrassing things. But you want them to be comfortable and kind of say embarrassing things. It's to your advantage, but don't be to their advantage because you're drunk. Kind of like, he said things like no matter how poor you are, you're dressed to impress. Your clothes, or you're never so poor that your clothes are not a priority. If you almost have no money, buy food and clothes, because dress to impress. If you want to be a self-made man, a ladder. So this is relevant to you guys today, okay? He laid out the problem, but he didn't have these ridiculous claims, all white people should give us everything they own, and all these dramatic things that are not. I'll go into detail later about why that's just not a very good approach, even if you're right. And you guys are right, but it's not about being right or wrong, It's about people skills and how to accomplish things in life, Okay, so Marcus Garvey teaches you to read a chapter of the Bible a day. He teaches you to study communism, because that's white people attempting to fix white people problems, but never be a communist. But just be aware of that. Okay? Was a teaching of Marcus Garvey. And you can read these books for yourself and see if I'm a liar or not for yourself. To dress to impress, he was a big fan of Dale Carnegie in his book How to Win Friends and Influence People. Use people skills, look them in the eye, shake their hand, use good hygiene. See this. Okay, so my point with what I want you to take away from me telling you about Marcus Garvey is that he lays down the situation, but then his solution isn't to blame anybody. His solution is to, buckle up your bootstraps, let's get going. If we're going to fix this problem, he said white man can row their canoe, black man can row their canoe, red man can row their canoe. Why would my brain forget the word row? So in other words, you work there. You don't expect anybody to give you things. You don't say, you guys have mistreated me, therefore give me stuff. He's saying, go to work. Comb your hair, brush your teeth. He goes into a lot of detail about bad breath. He goes into extreme detail about bad breath. How sometimes it can be your stomach. Don't have bad breath. Don't have bad hygiene. Dress good. Stand up tall, look them in the eyes, give them good handshakes. See what I mean? Work good work ethics. Don't expect anybody to give you anything. Work your way to the top and fight for your freedoms, but through the law, There's he's never saying to do anything, working and dressing good in these things, it's saying use the system at hand and fight for equality, so that you can, you fight for equality, but not with riots and things like that, with the legal systems. And as you get, later Martin Luther King kind of says something, we'll go over him in just next actually, but he says, we'll stand together in the jails, we'll stand together in the, there's going to be rough times getting up to the top. You might even be thrown in jail. Things are going to happen, but to stand united, to keep your faith, to love Jah, and to work hard. Expect things to be difficult. Things aren't going to be handed to you. Okay. So what happened was, he did this work and all that. So then people like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and all these people, that's their parents' generation, and they used his teachings kind of as like a manual, so that they could be the next generation of freedom fighters. Okay, and that's what Marcus Garvey was trying to do. Okay, so if you study the life of Malcolm X, if you've seen the movie, then at the very first of the movie with Denzel Washington, he talks about how his dad was a Garveyite and followed the teachings of Marcus Garvey. So like what happened was like in America and worldwide, but even especially in America because of the black Muslims, some of the Garveyites, because there was confusion like what's the next step? Is Marcus Garvey the Black Moses? Is he a religious thing? Is he like what? Wow, since it became this big thing. And some of them became black Muslims and some of them became Rastafarians and some of them became other things, no, never mind. That's a different subject. Athleites or whatever, following the teachings of the Holy Pity. So Marcus Garvey knew of the Rastafarians and called Haile Selassie a white people lover. Marcus Garvey was, the black race this and the black race that. Remember I told you the first here, Haile Selassie wins the contest. Of all these people, Martin Luther King Jr. and Haile Selassie are kind of on a higher level than Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X, as far as, but they all have something to offer. The message at this point, which we might as well take advantage of. But as far as you kind of like need all of their perspectives to really get all the power that you need right now. Okay, so now let's talk about Martin Luther King. No, let's talk about Malcolm X because we brought up the black Muslims. So Malcolm X takes that ball and runs with it, and he has all the same messages. He gives messages of we're gonna have to work, we're gonna have to do this. The sense of entitlement wasn't around as much then as it is now. So to be credible, you have to have that. But I think the beauty of Malcolm X, like if you I'll put in on this playlist, I'll do some speeches of him, so you can definitely know that I'm right. I love Malcolm X. Okay, and when people say he was just racist and a horrible person, I can appreciate why they would say that, but I don't like that because I happen to be a fan. It's like with the Rastafarians in the Rastafari movement, you deal with a similar thing. Like some became black Muslims, some became Rastas. The early Rastas, Marcus Garvey was into repatriation. He believed that black man should be able to go back to Africa, that they were brought here, they didn't want to, they should go back to Africa and build up Africa to being this great thing. Rastas called this subject repatriation. Different generations in Rasta interpret that different ways. The older generation took it very physical, a physical repatriation back to Africa. The younger generations are more into spiritual repatriation, where it's like, bring your heart back to Africa, but live in America or wherever you're from, to uproot, they call it, set roots in different places. So there's black people everywhere. So like within Rastafari, there's the black parchment scroll of black supremacy, which is a book that I have that's out of print that you won't be able to get. I've read books in like black supremacy, and that thinking is in Rastafari, and I've had people criticize me like, how can you be part of a movement that believes in black supremacy? Isn't that racist? So I've already been dealing with these issues long ago. So, even, like around the time you guys were born and even just before that, this was a subject I was dealing with a lot myself. I was kind of where you guys are now, like 20 years ago. And I decided that, it's how, if you study it, it's how people get out of oppression. Like I have a history of abuse and being physically and verbally and mentally abused. And like unspeakably, you don't want to hear about it, but I've been treated very poorly at times in my life. Now I know how to stand up for myself and recognize a toxic person and stuff. But to get out of abuse and oppression, you have to go through a phase where you kind of do push yourself in that way. You have to really kind of give yourself, you are great. you know, you're better than that person that's beating you up, you know, and you know, perhaps in a way, you know, everything's a perspective. That's not true, you know, but that's not going to get you out of your situation by sympathizing with someone that's beating you up. You just need to get the hell out of there, you know. So I believe that these moments that you see with Marcus Garvey Les and Malcolm X especially, these and even early Rastas, this black supremacy concept. So right now we're talking the 30s, the 1930s. We've gone from the 20s to the 30s and 40s. Was a necessary step, and it's understandable if it's criticized. Just don't get upset when people get like, I'm transgender. You think, what if I walked around being, you know, how many people are complete, you know, have contempt and everything for me? If I went around and, hey, you have contempt for me, you know, where would I get? What a waste of energy. Sometimes you just have to, okay, this person isn't worth my time. I'm not even going to give it any thought. They have a right to their opinion. Let's just, you know, move on, you know. So that's a thing of the past. So it needs to, you know, black man's already had their moment of black supremacy this and black supremacy that, you know. Isn't our hair beautiful? Isn't our nose beautiful? Aren't our lips beautiful? Isn't our skin beautiful? And all that. You'll hear Malcolm X say a lot about that. And you'll hear Marcus Garvey talk a lot about that, you know. So that's like the 20s and 30s and 40s, you know, and even into the 50s and even into the 60s, unfortunately, you know. But then, you know, by the 70s it starts fizzing out. By the 80s, you know, it's mostly fizzed out. By the 90s it's pretty much fizzed out. And about the time you guys were born, you know, so like it's out of date, you know, the black supremacy concept. Equality is the, so hopefully that's the main message I do as I walk through these moments. The principle that stood the test of time through all this, the consistency, the consistently best part of all this, the cream of the crop of African freedom fighters is equality and love and doing things the right way. Okay? So that was a moment that had to happen. So studying Malcolm X is a good moment for, you have to go through that in your personal development of taking courage, you know, of loving yourself, of doing that. You know, Malcolm X is like, all, you know, he wasn't a Christian. You know, Jesus says, turn the other cheek, like it says in the movie at the very first. You know, I don't believe in turning the other cheek, you know, like, if a man, you know, somebody's going to walk up and punch you in the nose, punch him back. Don't just turn the other cheek, you know. His message is all about taking courage. So it's not, don't see it as racist, you know. Let other people, who cares what they think. It's not racist. The early Rastafarians weren't racist, and they're not racist. This is just people dealing with a difficult situation. But it's in the past, even a long time ago in the past, a long time ago. And unfortunately it drags out longer than it needs to, but at this point we can hit this, we can do this better than that, okay? Okay, so Malcolm X, early Rastafarians. Now let's move to Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a beauty. Like, I don't even, like, it wouldn't be possible for me to criticize him, you know? So I'll put his famous speech on there. I want you to listen to his speech. He's not, you know, he's saying, he's all about, you know, we have the tools, America, the American Constitution, the Bill of Rights, you know, the concepts of this country, America. We have the tools to make it through this. You know, he's not trying to change. Suddenly it's not about a revolution anymore. It's not about change. You know, he's like, Jesus kicks butt and so does America. We belong, with our hands going like this to Jesus and our hands going like this to the American flag, you know? He doesn't say that, but that's just like, I'm just trying to nutshell him, you know? He's like, if you listen to his speech afterwards, notice that he's you know, he's not trying to loot and riot and make demands. He's about working, you know. We might get thrown in jail, he says at one point. Notice that part. You might, you know, things will be tough, Things will be difficult, but expect that. We're going to have to work to get out of this, and we deserve the equality. And when we're denied that equality, it's not us that did something wrong, it's them that did something wrong. Stay true to what's true and good, and stay true to love, and stay true to freedom and the things that work. And don't be discouraged, and don't let your candle get blown out by these people that might tempt you to push you into anger, and which, like Yoda says, leads to the dark side. And I always have to mention that. Me and Yoda. Wow. Anyway, so Martin Luther King is we love him. This is a person just to pretty much just listen to straight across. He's telling you exactly what you need to know. Okay. So Haile Selassie is the next one. Haile Selassie is just as awesome as Martin Luther King. Just as awesome. But the difference of Haile Selassie is Haile Selassie is not so in love with religion. Martin Luther King is like all love the Bible and every word of it, and love Jesus type person, But Haile Selassie is like, look, religion is part of the problem, okay? People need to stop confusing religion and spirituality. We need to get the future of humanity, of the good side of humanity, is spirituality, not religion. Religion is a system that has some problems in it, some systemic problems, some systemic racism even. He didn't say that, but religion has its limits, and he certainly puts a stamp of approval on religion at the same time. He's not saying it's a bunch of garbage. He loves everything about Jesus and about religion, and he prays to Jesus and gives all glory unto Jesus and everything. And just like Martin Luther King, but he doesn't put any of his trust so much into the religion that it's always right and it's the word of God and everything. He's saying look within, and he's not just saying, he's like kind of like the greatest hits of all this. He's saying take some courage. He's never racist. So like the reason Marcus Garvey called him a white lover is because in all his organizations and his government and everything, he always had white people. He used white people ideas. People were afraid of him in Ethiopia because he wasn't afraid to use white people ideas. He brought him the first printing press, the first airplane, the first roads, the first hospitals. And he would get all this money, and what would he spend his money on? Educating the youth. And just like education this, education that, he bet most of his money on that we're going to help Ethiopia be great by educating the youth. Tons of priority on educating the youth. Tons of priority on just building what you have, building the resources that you have, the natural resources, the things that you have, appreciating what you have and using that. But if there's something that's out of date or superstitious that needs to be changed, don't be afraid to change it. So, don't have limits. Don't bring in limitations because of your attachment to these things that aren't part of the future of progress. So he's not afraid to do that. So he's different in that way, and he's different in that he has white people work with him.